Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery and I'm preparing to check in on a couple of my European Nightcrawler worm bins. They're right over there stacked up on top of each other. And the stuff that I've got lined up for them is just a variety of different types of fruits and veggies out of my freezer, as well as a couple soiled napkins, as you can see. One of the staple foods that I normally feed my worm bins when I come down here is coffee, but I have no coffee for them today, but I do have some ground up corn on the cob, so I'm going to probably give them some of that as well. I got my worm chow too, maybe we'll use a little bit of that as well. These systems are kind of a novelty setup in which we're composting cotton, and we've got some cotton t-shirts in these, so we're going to check them out, see how the t-shirts are coming along, and get them fed. So let's get them up on the bench and get to work. The European nightcrawlers have been living in these systems for 90 days now. And it was only half of that time, 45 days, that the t-shirts have been in here. So it just so happens that those numbers work out really easy for me to remember. So when I was looking at the spreadsheet that I track all this information on, I thought to myself, today's a really easy day for me to come down here and remember the numbers without any notes. But I did take some notes just in case I forget. Only because I also wanted to share some other information with you, such as the estimated worm count in these systems. Not sure if I've shared it before, but the numbers are quite close. I can almost consider these to be twin bins, but I'm really going to just treat them as sort of brother bins or sister bins, since there is an estimated 10 worm difference between the two systems. So basically it's 1,880 worms living in bin number 1 and 1,870 worms living in bin number 2. It almost seems like we could just grab 5 worms out of the one with the larger number and put them over there, and then we would have 1875 in both, and then we would actually have twin bins, but it's not all that important, so we're not going to bother. I'll tell you, for 90-day-old systems, my little peek over there just showed all these castings piling up. Very nice. Now, I am reminded, and it totally slipped my mind until I saw this tiny little speckle of green here. I was beginning to worry that some of the ink that was used for the t-shirt that's in bin number 1, it's a Microsoft t-shirt, I was worried about what I was observing last time, which was little flakes of the paint of the design on that t-shirt coming off. Very vivid, bright green colors, and whatever other colors the t-shirts are made up of, and it was just making me worry that perhaps perhaps this stuff is just going to end up littering the vermicompost, making it almost unusable because it's full of all kinds of materials that won't even break down. Kind of made me consider the possibility of actually pulling these shirts out, or actually pulling the shirt out of bin number 1 here, just for concern over contaminating a bunch of castings with material that's not going to break down in the form of the ink that's on the t-shirts, or at least on this t-shirt. I don't think that the t-shirt that's in bin number 2, the Roxio t-shirt, is shedding any of the ink that was used to put the pattern on it. So I don't think there's real reason for concern there, but here you can see some of the design is stuff that's just never going to break down because it's certainly not cotton. It's just the ink that was used to put the pattern onto the shirt. Let's get the shirt out of here and try to gauge whether or not that's what we're going to do today. We could very well end today's check-in with only one of the bins having a t-shirt in it. We might end up sticking with the Roxio t-shirt over in bin number 2, but make the decision to pull out the Microsoft t-shirt due to the potential of contaminating the castings. I guess there's also that option of pulling this stuff out. I mean, if you look right here, for example, where it actually says Microsoft, I'm not sure that that's going to wind up contaminating the castings. If it does, it's black, so it's not going to even show. But I really would prefer to have, you know, castings that aren't littered with all kinds of you know, non-biodegradable materials. I wondered if we could just tear off the sections that have the writing and patterns on them and dispense of those and then let the rest of the shirt continue, but I'm not quite sure I remember how large the pattern was. I mean, if we could pull off large chunks like this in one piece and eliminate that ink in large chunks, then perhaps the rest of the shirt can remain. But now would definitely be the time to do that, because in time this stuff is just going to become tiny little fragments beyond the point in time when it would be possible to actually do that anymore. So let's actually assess that situation and see if that's an option for us here. Not sure quite how to do that, but there's no better way to get to the finish line than to actually start into what you're trying to accomplish. The material falls apart so easily. It's incredible. And I can't really give credit to the worms and the worm bin occupants for that progress that these shirts are making, because both of these shirts went in here into these bins with already a tremendous amount of wear and holes and degradation, making me assume that it wasn't going to take very long for these things to break down. So let's see, I mean here for example I'm seeing a sleeve. Sleeve's not going to have much if any pattern on it, but here I could see little traces of a pattern poking through. I keep piling it up over here on the side of the bin. So I mean that piece right there, that sleeve, seems like it's already such that we don't have to worry about it too much. Here's like the neck and the tag, clearly, which means over here would have to be the other sleeve, right? So the sleeves, I remember, did not have this kind of wear on them. There was big holes. There were a couple big holes on the back of the t-shirt, but the front of the shirt didn't have holes on it, nor did the sleeves. So that right there tells me that these shirts are making pretty decent progress just by being in the bins, or at least this shirt is. And now this, is this a sleeve? I can't even tell anymore. This does actually seem like a sleeve and a part of the shirt itself. I gotta tell you, these worms do seem to be doing a number on these shirts. I'm starting to wonder if perhaps there might have only been a small little pattern on this shirt that had that sort of weird heavy-duty ink on it, because I don't feel like I'm seeing so much of it, unless it already all started just falling off and now I do need to pick it out in little tiny fragments throughout the entire batch of material, which is a little bit of a drag. But if that's the case, then so be it, I guess. I don't know, maybe I could just use this stuff to fill a hole somewhere if it comes to that. I really had this feeling like it was going to be a much greater problem than this, but I am starting to get the sense that it's really not a big deal. So I think the stuff that I pulled out was good. It was good to get rid of it and get it out of the bin, but I don't really see any more of it. So perhaps I was overreacting a little bit to the situation over there. So I guess we'll just leave this shirt to continue. I didn't see any more of that really bright green or blue pattern, but you know, you could see I did pull out a pretty good sized batch of the stuff over here. I really thought there'd be more of it for whatever reason, unless perhaps it is actually breaking down, although I didn't expect that it would, but maybe it is. Maybe there's really nothing for me to be concerned about. Oh, whatever. Let's just continue excavating where the feeding zone had been. If we see any more of that stuff, we'll just play it safe and we'll pull it out. And perhaps from this point forward, maybe it's a non-issue. Maybe we won't even see any more of it going forward, and we won't have to sweat it. So we'll just take our chances. We'll put the shirt back in. Oh, Here too, I saw a pretty good size chunk of blue. Yeah, I mean, if a piece of it just sort of gets wrapped up in some castings, that could also be the explanation for it, that it's kind of obscured by some material that it's managed to get wrapped in. All right, you know what? Let's disregard it and not worry so much about it. If we see a little piece, we can always pull it out, but we're not going to stop the show because of that. Let's move on to bin number 2 and see how the Roxio t-shirt is coming along. On this t-shirt, I don't recall there being such heavy ink used to create the pattern. But this shirt was also kind of already very, very worn and full of holes, at least on the back, I think. Both shirts had pretty good size holes. And perhaps the reason we're seeing such large gaping holes in it today is because of the way I arranged the feeding. I'm pretty sure last feeding we did our best to try to not just put the foods that we were putting in alongside the t-shirts, but we actually sort of laid in part of the t-shirt down into the feeding zone, placed in some of the food, and then we folded over another piece of the t-shirt, and then placed in some more of the food. I think the second layer was the coffee, and then we folded over the last little piece of the fabric on top of it all, and then we even laid in more food, which I think was the pulverized corn cob, which I have more of today. And perhaps that's the reason we're seeing so much progress, because the food was actually sort of almost lasagna stacked in between layers of fabric to really get the worms in there to go after the kitchen scraps, but in the process also be required to squirm around within the fabric to gain access to the yummy foods. And as far as the foods go, I mean, you know, it's been 13 days since our last check-in. I could smell a little bit of what was in here last time, which was a piece of lime. I just saw it even. I saw a piece of lime, but I don't know. I'm not going to go crazy looking for it. But it is kind of a nice fresh lime scent that I'm experiencing here. I think it's time to start getting the foods back in. We can start by returning these corn cobs, and as long as we're able to, if we can, we're going to begin into the whole assisting the corn cobs in the breakdown process by cracking them. Any chance we can, cracking or crushing them if possible. So here too, gradually dropping in part of the t-shirt so we can start stacking in some of the foods, and then applying another layer of fabric onto which we'll put even more food. And I think if we continue with that approach, inevitably the t-shirts are going to get a huge amount of traffic on them, and the worms are, you know, probably just not going to be able to help themselves in terms of nibbling away at the t-shirts too while they're going after the yummy kitchen scraps. Somehow the way I laid it all out last time, it seemed like it was very organized. I think it was because it was all open. I was going to do layer 1, fold it over, layer 2, fold it over, layer 3. And that's probably the reason it was so easy to get all that stuff in here the way I did last time. This time, with the t-shirts falling apart already the way they are, which is kind of nice to see after only 45 days, it is becoming a little bit more tricky. So here I've got potato peel and some orange peel and some chunks of tomato and actual whole cherry tomatoes that were not good. And let's not forget these contaminated napkins and paper towels that I'm going to include down here in the feeding zone as supplementary bedding. And you know, I've also got my prepared bedding here. So before I get to the point where I totally forget to apply any, let's at least throw a little bit of that in here too. We'll build out this feeding zone nicely for them, and hopefully they'll appreciate that, and in return do us the favor of breaking down our t-shirts even more. All right, I think we can deplete the last of the kitchen scraps. Oops. Here we've got a plum that went bad. Perhaps there's only one plum, but then here's what I think is part of a peach. So one system gets a plum, the other gets a peach. To me that still seems fair, even though it's not identical. And we've still got our pulverized corn, which looks kind of like this, and I've still got a good bit of it here, and I want to deplete this stuff because I do have additional corn cobs that I intend to similarly pulverize to that consistency. So I've been applying that stuff pretty liberally in most of my systems lately, trying to do away with it so I can have the incentive to get the collection of corn cobs that I've been amassing into the grinder and pulverize that stuff as well. So let's see. Let's put this layer of delicious corn down in here, which I'm getting the sense that the worms definitely enjoy eating, although it's kind of hard to tell. This stuff I've been keeping it in my freezer too because it has a little bit of moisture content, and I was worried that it might get moldy, and I didn't know how long it would take for me to deplete it and get it fed to my worm bins. So I really thought it would be a good idea to try to prevent it from getting all nasty. I'm going to put in a little bit of this stuff too, which is pulverized eggshell, which is the grit that I use in my systems, just because it's probably a good idea to give the worms some of that too. And you know what? I'd like to just get my hands clean, so I'm going to use a little bit of this prepared bedding to try to clean off my hands. It's true that I've still got some fragments of leaves on my fingers now, but I just wanted to get those sticky castings off my hands. We've still got worm chow to apply, so why don't we use that as the topper onto that last layer of fabric. So we've got worm chow, pulverized corn, kitchen scraps, and at the very bottom layer, the leftover corn cobs from who knows how long ago. Those have been in here for some time, I assume. So now we've definitely given the worms good incentive to crawl in between all the different layers of the fabric to continue nibbling away on those t-shirts to try to get us to the point where they're gone. And I'm starting to wonder how long they're going to take to really get to the finish line. I mean, 45 days in, it does seem like they're starting to make some pretty good progress already. But I really don't know exactly what to expect. I kind of excavated the edge of the bin furthest away from me in order to get the feeding zone covered up, but I'd also like to do a similar excavation and examination of the edge closer to me. I mean, I have no reason for concern, or I'm not checking there because I'm looking for trouble. I just like to aerate the material in my bins, just make sure everything looks okay. And at least this way we get a little sense of how things are doing throughout the bins. The material is definitely coming along good. I mean, 90-day-old system, all these castings piling up, these worms are doing a pretty good job. And you know, when you're talking about a couple systems that have nearly 2,000 worms living in them, it is fair to expect that, you know, the worms are going to be cranking out the castings. Not to mention the fact that they're also going to be reproducing and creating baby worms to help with the cause and increase the population size. Well, I smelled it before I saw it. Here's another piece of lime from probably the previous feeding. I guess we'll stuff that down there somewhere in the feeding area as well. And I guess the other advantage to fluffing up the outer edges is that I've now got a slightly deeper bin, you know. By fluffing it all up, I think I've got a little bit more material with which I can almost certainly cover up the entire feeding zone, which is what I prefer to do. I'd really like to see the entire feeding zone submerged Although the way we applied the food and covered it up with fabric every time and then really only put worm chow on the top layer, I don't think there's much stuff here that would attract pests or anything like that. So the real reason typically I like to submerge my foods is that I wouldn't want to have any sort of passerby insects catch a whiff of what's going on and take an interest and try to move in, but by making sure that the foods are pretty much submerged every time, I usually feel like it's almost certain that the any sort of insects that might be cruising around down here in my basement, not to say that there's any sort of a major insect issue, but sometimes a bug or two sneaks in. And sometimes you even get a few fruit flies that start to mate and create a little bit of a population and infestation. And we don't need that in our worm bins, do we? I know I don't. So, alright. We took a little bit more time there, a little more time than I thought I would, only because I was a little bit concerned over those fragments of paint coming off the Microsoft t-shirt over here in bin number 1. But I believe, just based on what we saw here today and the fact that we picked some of the bigger pieces out and didn't see a whole lot more after that, I think it's probably not really a reason for concern. Certainly no reason to remove the shirts, that's for sure. So we're going to press on as is. The one other thing I wanted to add, though, before we put the plastic covers on, is a couple of piece of paper covering, top coverings. I like to put these down sometimes beneath the plastic just to give the recirculating moisture that's circulating beneath the plastic a place to drop onto and give the worms a place to hang out and collect the moisture that drops down there. So I just like to put down these top coverings of newspaper usually in my bins when I can. And I just noticed that these systems didn't have them, so I figured, what the heck, let's upgrade and make sure that these systems have top covering newspapers as well. All right, everyone. Well, we've got only a couple things remaining to do around here, but those things are kind of boring, you know, cleaning up, putting away, stuff that I'm not going to waste your time with. But before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.